The sound of the wedding march filled the hall, but all I could hear was silence. My sister Elena stood at the altar in ivory silk, her veil catching the afternoon light through stained glass windows. The guests smiled. The flowers bloomed white and gold. Everything looked perfect, exactly as our parents had planned. I sat in the back row, my hands folded in my lap. They felt empty. They had felt empty for 3 months now, ever since the day I came home from the conservatory and found the space against the living room wall bare. Just a rectangular shadow on the carpet where my grandmother's piano had stood for 15 years. We needed the money for Elena's wedding, my mother had said, not looking at me. It's just gathering dust anyway. You can practice at school. I had stood there, staring at the empty space, unable to speak. The Steinway upright my grandmother left me in her will. The instrument she taught me to play on when I was 6. The keys I'd touched every single day since she died. Gone, sold to a stranger for my sister's reception venue deposit. Catherine, don't be dramatic, my father had added. Family comes first. Elena's wedding is important. I wasn't family then. I understood that now. The ceremony ended. Elena kissed her husband David, a banker from the East Side with perfect teeth and a trust fund. Everyone applauded. I clapped too, my palms making soft, meaningless sounds. At the reception, Elena glowed. Our parents orbited around her like satellites, adjusting her veil, bringing her champagne, introducing her to relatives who'd flown in from 3 states. No one asked where I was sitting. No one noticed when I stood by the dessert table, alone, watching the band set up. I had stopped playing 3 months ago. My hands forgot how to want music. At the conservatory, my teachers asked what happened. I told them nothing. How could I explain that every time I touched a keyboard now, all I felt was the absence of the one that mattered? Catherine, my mother appeared beside me, her smile tight. Why aren't you mingling? Go talk to your cousins. I'm fine here. You look miserable. This is your sister's day. Try to be happy for her. I nodded. She walked away, back toward Elena, who was laughing with her bridesmaids. I watched them through the champagne glass bubbles, distorted and far away. The evening blurred. Speeches, toasts, first dance. I moved through it like a ghost, present but not seen. When they cut the cake, I thought about my grandmother's hands guiding mine across the keys. She had been a concert pianist before arthritis took her career. The piano was her voice after she couldn't play anymore. And now it was gone, sold for flowers and catering, and a venue with chandeliers. My grandmother had died when I was 16. The piano was the only piece of her I had left. She'd written it into her will specifically, to my granddaughter Catherine, who has inherited my love of music and my stubborn dedication to it. May she play this instrument until her own hands can no longer move, and may she pass it on with the same love I give it to her now. I had read those words so many times I'd memorized them. My parents had read them once, then put the will in a drawer and forgot about it. Late in the reception, near midnight, I stood on the hotel balcony overlooking the city. The music from inside was muffled, distant. Below, the streets glittered with traffic lights and neon signs. I leaned against the railing and closed my eyes. I thought about jumping. Not seriously, not really, but the thought was there, soft and persistent like a melody I couldn't forget. What would change if I disappeared? Would they even notice? Or would they just be relieved there was one less person to compare Elena to, one less reminder that not everyone in the family was golden and perfect? The wind was cold against my face. I gripped the railing harder. Catherine, come inside, they're doing the bouquet toss. I didn't move. I stayed there on the balcony until my hands went numb from the cold, until the party sounds faded to almost nothing, until I felt as empty as the space where the piano used to be. When I finally went back in, the party was winding down. Elena sat at a table with David, still glowing, still perfect. She saw me and waved, beckoning me over. Katie, did you have fun? I nodded. You seem sad, she said, tilting her head. Are you okay? I'm fine. Is this about the piano? She lowered her voice, glancing at our parents across the room. I know you're upset, but it was just sitting there, and you can always play at school, right? This wedding was important. You understand that, don't you? I looked at her, really looked at her, my sister who'd gotten the lead in every school play while I accompanied on piano from the orchestra pit, who'd gotten the convertible for her 16th birthday while I got a bus pass, who'd gotten a wedding that cost more than my entire 4 years of conservatory tuition. I understand, I said. She smiled, relieved, and turned back to David. I walked away. The drive home was silent. I sat in the back seat while our parents discussed how perfect everything had been, how beautiful Elena looked, how impressed the guests were with the venue, with the flowers, with the ice sculpture that cost $3,000. No one asked if I had enjoyed myself. In my room that night, I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed with photos from the wedding. Elena in her dress, Elena cutting the cake, Elena dancing, Elena throwing the bouquet. I scrolled through them all, then put the phone face down on my nightstand. I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m, I got up and walked downstairs. The house was dark and quiet. I went to the living room and stood where the piano used to be. The shadow was fainter now, slowly disappearing as feet crossed over it, as furniture got rearranged, as life moved. On without it. I knelt down and placed my palms flat on the carpet, where the pedals used to be. I tried to remember the weight of them under my feet, the resistance, the way they'd creak slightly when I held them down. But the memory was already fading, becoming less solid, less real. That's when something inside me broke completely. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet fracture like ice cracking on a frozen lake. I felt it happen, felt something essential give way, and then there was nothing but emptiness. I went back upstairs. I took the bottle of sleeping pills from my bathroom cabinet, the ones prescribed after my grandmother died, when I couldn't sleep for weeks. There were maybe 20 left. I looked at them for a long time, the small white tablets in my palm. Then, I swallowed them all, one by one, with water from the bathroom sink. The room started to blur at the edges. I lay down on my bed and closed my eyes. I thought about my grandmother, about her hands on the piano keys, about the way she'd smile when I finally got a difficult passage right. I thought about music, about the pieces I'd never get to play now, about the silence that had lived inside me for 3 months. My heartbeat slowed. Each beat came further apart, like measures of rest stretching longer and longer. The darkness became softer, warmer. I wasn't afraid. I felt peaceful, finally, like I was sinking into something safe. I could almost hear music. Chopin, maybe, or Debussy. The notes my grandmother loved best. The world went still. My breathing stopped. Everything ended. I woke up to morning light streaming through my window. For a moment, I lay there confused. The ceiling looked wrong. The walls were a different colour. My bed felt smaller, the mattress harder than I remembered. I sat up slowly. My room was different. The posters were younger, bands I'd listened to in high school. The furniture was arranged the way it had been years ago. My desk had textbooks I recognised from junior year. On my nightstand, my phone was an older model, the kind I'd had when I was 17. I picked it up with shaking hands. The date read March 15th, 5 years earlier. My heart began to race. I stood up and walked to the mirror. The girl looking back at me was younger, her face softer, her eyes less tired. I was 17 again. 5 years before the wedding. 5 years before they sold the piano. I touched my face, my arms, my chest. Everything felt real. The texture of my skin, the beat of my heart, the air moving in and out of my lungs. This wasn't a dream. I remembered everything. the conservatory, the empty space in the living room, the wedding, Elena in her white dress, the balcony, the pills, the darkness, the ending. All of it was still there, sharp and clear in my mind, like a recording I couldn't stop playing. I had died, and somehow, impossibly, I had come back. I walked to my door and opened it slowly. Downstairs, I heard voices. My parents were in the kitchen, arguing about something mundane. I could hear Elena's voice too, high and bright, talking about her boyfriend of the month, some boy named Tyler who would be gone by summer. I stopped at the top of the stairs. My hands gripped the railing. Everything was the same. They didn't know. They had no idea what would happen, what they would do to me, how it would end. But I knew. I knew everything. I went back to my room and sat on my bed. The knowledge settled over me like a weight. I had been given something impossible, a second chance. Time had reset, but my memory hadn't. I knew exactly what was coming. The question was, what would I do differently? I thought about my grandmother. She was still alive right now, 5 years in the past. I could visit her today if I wanted. The piano was still in the living room, untouched, safe. I could hear it from here if I listened carefully enough, could almost feel the keys under my fingers. I stood up and walked downstairs, my feet moving automatically. In the living room, there it was. The Steinway upright, dark wood gleaming in the morning light. I walked over to it slowly, almost afraid to touch it, afraid it would disappear. Then I sat down on the bench and placed my hands on the keys. The sound that came out was like breathing again after being underwater. I played a scale, then a chord progression, then the opening bars of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. My grandmother's favourite. The piece she'd played at her final concert before her hands betrayed her. "Catherine?" My mother appeared in the doorway. "You're up early?" I stopped playing and turned to look at her. She looked younger too, less worn down, fewer grey hairs. In 5 years, she would be planning Elena's wedding. She would look at me and say the piano was just gathering dust. She would sell it without asking, without hesitation. "I was just practicing," I said. "Well, keep it down. Your sister is still sleeping." She left. I turned back to the piano and played the Nocturne all the way through, every note perfect, every dynamic exactly as my grandmother had taught me. My fingers remembered even if 5 years had been erased. I would not let them take this from me again. I would not let them erase me again. The next few weeks unfolded like a script I'd already read. I knew what was coming. Elena would start dating David in 2 months. They'd meet at a mutual friend's party. In a year, they'd get engaged. My parents would begin planning immediately, and the costs would add up quickly. They'd look around for things to sell, to cut, to sacrifice, and they'd look at the piano. But I was ready now. I had time to prepare, time to build defences, time to make myself impossible to ignore. I started documenting everything. I found my grandmother's will in my father's filing cabinet and made copies. I researched property laws, inheritance rights, ownership transfers. The piano had been left to me specifically, named in the will, with clear language. It was mine, legally and completely. My parents were its custodians until I turned 18, but they had no right to sell it without my permission. I turned 18 in 6 months. I began practicing obsessively, 4 hours every day after school. I cancelled plans with friends. I stopped going to parties. Music became my entire focus. My teachers noticed immediately. They said I'd improved dramatically, that something had shifted in my playing. They were right. I played now with the memory of absence, with the knowledge of what it felt like to lose this instrument, this connection to my grandmother, this piece of myself. Every note mattered. Every practice session was a battle won. I also started teaching piano lessons after school. I put up flyers at the community centre, at coffee shops, at the library. Young kids from the neighbourhood started coming to our house twice a week. 5-year-olds learning their first scales, 6-year-olds struggling through simple melodies. I charged $20 per half hour. My parents were surprised but pleased. Finally, being productive, my father said. Maybe music isn't just a hobby after all. I smiled and said nothing. The money went into a savings account they didn't know about, one I'd opened at a bank across town using my school ID. I visited my grandmother every Sunday. She lived in a retirement home near the lake in a small apartment filled with photographs and sheet music. Her hand shook now, the arthritis advanced, but her mind was sharp. "You're playing beautifully," she said one afternoon, after I'd played for her on the community piano downstairs. "Better than ever. What's changed?" I looked at her weathered face, at the hands that had once moved across keys with impossible grace. I wanted to tell her everything. About the future, about her death in a year, about the will, about what my parents would do. But I couldn't. "I just understand it better now," I said. "What you were trying to teach me." She smiled. "Good. Never stop playing, Catherine. No matter what happens, promise me." "I promise." When Elena started dating David, I was polite and kind. I asked about him. I smiled at family dinners when she talked about their dates, about how successful he was, about his plans to work at his father's investment firm. I gave her no reason to resent me, no ammunition for future arguments. "You're being so mature about this," my mother said one evening. "Usually you get so jealous when Elena has a boyfriend." I hadn't been jealous in my previous life either. I'd been invisible, but I didn't correct her. "I'm happy for her," I said. My practice intensified. I started entering competitions, small ones at first, then regional, then state level. I won 3rd place in a statewide competition for young pianists, then 2nd place in another, then 1st. My parents came to that recital. They sat in the audience and watched me play Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C# minor. When I finished, when the applause started, I saw my father's face. He looked surprised, almost confused, as if he'd never really seen me before. After the ceremony, when they gave me the trophy, my mother hugged me. "We're so proud of you," she said. I wanted to ask where that pride had been in my other life when they'd sold my instrument for party decorations, but I just thanked her. I turned 18 on a Tuesday in September. I went to the bank that afternoon and signed papers that transferred the piano's title entirely into my name. I had the will, I had my ID, I had documentation. The instrument was legally mine now, protected by law and paperwork. My parents couldn't touch it, even if they wanted to. That evening at dinner, I told them. "I've been looking into my inheritance," I said calmly. "The piano grandmother left me. I wanted to make sure everything was properly documented." My father frowned. "Why?" "Just being thorough. It's a valuable instrument, worth about $20,000 now, according to an appraiser I consulted. I want to make sure it's protected." "Protected from what?" my mother asked. "From being sold," I said, meeting her eyes, "or taken, or borrowed. It belongs to me." I wanted that to be clear. There was a long silence. Elena looked confused. My parents exchanged a glance. "We would never sell your piano, Catherine," my mother said finally. "What a strange thing to worry about." I nodded. "Good. I'm glad we're clear on that." The conversation moved on, but I'd planted the seed. They knew now that I was paying attention, that I understood ownership and rights. They knew the piano wasn't just sitting there anymore, forgotten and taken for granted. The months passed. I continued teaching lessons, saving money, practicing. My reputation as a pianist grew. I started winning bigger competitions, getting featured in local music magazines, receiving scholarship offers from conservatories across the country. My parents began to notice. They came to my recitals now, sat in the front row, applauded loudly. They bragged to their friends about their daughter, the pianist, the competition winner, the scholarship recipient. It felt hollow, but I accepted it without comment. When Elena and David got engaged at Thanksgiving, just as I knew they would, I congratulated them warmly. I helped Elena look at wedding venues. I listened to her talk about dress designs and flower arrangements and whether to have a band or a DJ. I was the perfect sister, supportive and kind and never overshadowing. "You're being so wonderful about all this," she said one afternoon while we looked at invitation samples. "I was worried you'd be jealous." "Why would I be jealous? Are you jealous?" I asked. "Because all the attention is on my gosh on me right now, and you're still single and you're younger and—" She stopped, looking uncomfortable. "I'm happy for you," I said simply. "You found someone you love. That's wonderful." She hugged me, relieved. I hugged her back and said nothing about the future I'd already lived, the wedding I'd already attended, the betrayal I'd already survived. The wedding planning began in earnest. My parents dove into it with complete focus. Every dinner conversation was about vendors, guest lists, catering options, venue comparisons. The costs started mounting: $5,000 for the venue, $3,000 for flowers, $8,000 for catering, $2,000 for photography. The numbers grew and grew. I watched it happen, saying nothing, waiting. 3 months before the wedding, my father brought it up. "The reception venue is more expensive than we thought," he said at dinner. "We're going to need to make some adjustments to the budget." I felt Elena tense beside me. She'd been stressed about money for weeks, worried they'd have to downgrade something, worried her perfect day would be compromised. "We'll figure it out," my mother said quickly. "We always do." My father's eyes drifted toward the living room, toward the piano visible through the doorway. I saw the thought form in his mind, saw the calculation happening. "Catherine," he said slowly, carefully, "have you ever thought about selling your grandmother's piano? It's just sitting there, and you're going to college next year anyway. You could practice at school, and it would really help with Elena's wedding costs." There it was. The exact same words. The same reasoning. The same request that, in my previous life, hadn't been a request at all. I put down my fork and looked at him. "No," I said. "No? The piano isn't for sale, it's mine. Grandmother left it to me specifically, and I intend to keep it." "Catherine, be reasonable," my mother said. "This is your sister's wedding. Family comes first. We all have to make sacrifices." "Then perhaps the family should have budgeted better," I said calmly. "The piano has nothing to do with Elena's wedding. It's mine, it's legally documented as mine, and it's not leaving this house." The table went silent. Elena stared at me. My parents looked shocked. "I can't believe you're being this selfish," my father said, his voice rising. "After everything we've done for you. We've supported your music, paid for your lessons," "which I'm grateful for," I interrupted. "But that doesn't give you the right to sell something that belongs to me. Grandmother left me that piano in her will. She wrote specific words about it, about passing it on, about honouring her legacy. I'm not selling that for a party." "It's not just a party," Elena said quietly. "It's my wedding. It's the most important day of my life." I turned to her. "And I hope it's beautiful. I really do. But it doesn't require my piano. There are other ways to save money. Scale back the flowers. Choose a simpler venue. Reduce the guest list. Those are all reasonable options. Selling my inheritance isn't." "You're being incredibly selfish," my mother said, her face tight with anger. "Your sister has always supported you. Always. And when she needs you, you refuse to help." "I'm not refusing to help. I'm refusing to give up something that's mine. There's a difference." The argument went on for an hour. My parents tried reasoning, guilting, demanding. They brought up every favour they'd ever done for me, every dinner they'd cooked, every ride to practice they'd given. They acted as if my entire existence was a debt I owed them, payable on demand. I remained calm and firm. The piano was mine. The answer was no. End of discussion. They couldn't force me. I was 18, the ownership was legal, and I'd made sure every document was ironclad. I'd even consulted a lawyer using money from my teaching lessons just to be certain. Finally, my father stood up. Fine, keep your precious piano. But don't expect us to help you pay for college anymore. You're on your own. I have a full scholarship, I said, to the Eastman School of Music. They offered it to me last month. Full tuition, room and board, stipend for expenses. I'll be fine. He stared at me. They all did. I hadn't told them yet. I'd been waiting for this exact moment, for the threat I knew was coming. When were you planning to mention this? My mother asked. When it became relevant, I said, which is now. I stood up and went to my room, leaving them sitting at the table in silence. The next few months were tense. My parents barely spoke to me. When they did, their voices were cold and formal. Elena tried to play peacemaker but gave up after a few weeks. The house felt divided, war lines drawn across the dinner table. I continued practicing, teaching lessons, preparing for college. My students multiplied. Word spread that I was good with kids, patient and encouraging. Soon I had 10 regular students, then 15, then 20. The money added up. I opened a second savings account. The wedding approached. My parents managed to find the money somewhere, made it work without selling anything. They took out a small loan. They cut corners on things Elena didn't care about as much. The reception would be smaller, the flowers less elaborate, but it would still happen. A week before the ceremony, Elena came to my room. She knocked softly and waited for me to answer. Can I come in? I nodded. She sat on my bed looking uncomfortable. I don't want things to be like this between us, she said. You're my sister. I love you. This wedding stuff has made everything so complicated. I know. Will you at least come to the wedding? Please? It won't feel right if you're not there. I looked at her. In my previous life, I'd gone. I'd sat in the back row and watched her shine while I faded into nothing. I'd stood on that balcony and thought about jumping. I'd come home and ended everything. But this wasn't that life anymore. I'll come, I said, on one condition. What? There's a piano at the reception venue. I checked. It's a baby grand in the corner of the Weisha ballroom. Let me play something during dinner. Just one piece. 10 minutes. That's all I ask. She hesitated. The band is already booked. They're expensive. I know. I'm not asking to replace them. Just 10 minutes during dinner before the dancing starts. One piece, for grandmother. She would have wanted to be there, and this is the only way I can bring her. Elena studied my face. Something in my tone must have reached her, because she nodded slowly. Okay, I'll arrange it with the venue coordinator. Thank you. She stood up to leave, then paused at the door. I'm sorry. About everything, about Mum and Dad, about the piano thing. I didn't know it would turn into this. It's okay. No, it's not. I should have stood up for you. I should have told them to find another way. But I wanted everything to be perfect so badly that I didn't think about what it would cost you. I looked at her and saw something I hadn't seen in my previous life. Genuine remorse. I forgive you, I said. She smiled, tears in her eyes, and left. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I had 1 week to prepare. I pulled up the sheet music for Debussy's Clair de Lune and began studying it again, even though I'd played it 1,000 times. This performance had to be perfect. The wedding day arrived. I wore a simple dress, deep blue, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention from the bride. I did my hair simply. I wore minimal makeup. I looked nice but forgettable, exactly as I'd planned. I sat in the middle of the church this time, not in the back. I watched Elena walk down the aisle in her white dress, watched her marry David, watched my parents cry with joy. The ceremony was beautiful. Elena looked genuinely happy. At the reception, I ate quietly at my assigned table. The band played upbeat music. People danced. Everything unfolded exactly as it had before, but I wasn't drowning this time. I was watching from above the water, breathing steadily, waiting. During dinner, As dessert was being served, Elena stood up and took the microphone from the band leader. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," she said, her voice amplified across the room. "This day has been perfect. And before we continue with the dancing, my sister Catherine is going to play something for us. She's an incredible pianist, and I wanted her to share her gift with all of you tonight." She gestured toward me. People turned to look. My parents looked surprised and uncomfortable, like they'd forgotten this was happening. I stood up and walked to the piano in the corner of the room. It was a beautiful instrument, a Yamaha baby grand, well-maintained and perfectly tuned. I sat down and adjusted the bench, testing the pedals, feeling the weight of the keys. The room went quiet. 200 people watching, waiting. I took a breath. Then I began to play. The piece was Debussy's Clair de Lune. My grandmother had played it at her last recital before arthritis ended her career. She taught it to me when I was 12, making me practice the same 8 bars for weeks, until I understood that it wasn't about the notes. It was about the spaces between them, the silence that gave the sound meaning, the way one phrase could break your heart while the next one healed it. I let the music flow through my hands, every phrase shaped by years of practice and the memory of loss. I played it with the weight of everything I'd lived through. Both lives, all the pain and silence and emptiness transformed into something beautiful. I played it perfectly. The opening measures were soft, almost hesitant, like moonlight on water. Then the melody emerged, clear and pure. I shaped each phrase carefully, letting some notes ring longer, pulling back on others, creating space for the music to breathe. In the middle section, when the tempo increased, I felt my grandmother's hands guiding mine. I heard her voice, "Don't rush, let it build naturally. The emotion comes from control, not speed." I played with absolute precision and absolute feeling, holding nothing back. When I reached the final section, the return to the opening theme, I let the music soften again. The last few measures floated out into the room like whispers, like memories, like things too precious to say aloud. The final chord faded into silence. For a long moment, no one moved. The room was completely still. Then the applause started. Not polite, obligatory clapping. Real applause, genuine and warm. People stood up. Someone whistled. I heard my name being called out by guests I didn't even know. Elena was smiling, tears streaming down her face. David was applauding too, looking impressed. Around the room, I saw people wiping their eyes, moved by something they hadn't expected to feel at a wedding reception. My parents sat frozen at their table. My mother's face was pale. My father stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time in his life. I stood up and bowed slightly, then returned to my seat. For the rest of the evening, people came up to talk to me. They asked about my music, my plans, my training. They wanted to know where I was studying, what concerts I had coming up, whether I gave private lessons. Business cards appeared, invitations to perform at other events, requests for my contact information. I became visible, suddenly, in a way I'd never been in my previous life. Across the room, I watched my parents process what had happened. They couldn't ignore me now. They couldn't dismiss my music as a hobby, couldn't pretend the piano was just furniture. I just performed for 200 people and received a standing ovation. The piano they'd wanted to sell had created this moment. Near the end of the night, people were starting to leave. My father approached me. "That was impressive," he said stiffly. "I didn't realize you'd gotten so good." "I've always been this good," I said quietly. "You just never paid attention." Hill flinched. "Catherine, it's fine. I don't need you to understand. I just need you to stay away from my piano." I walked away before he could respond. My mother found me by the coat check. "You made your point," she said, very dramatic. "I wasn't making a point. I was honoring grandmother, like I promised her I would. She would have wanted you to help your sister. She wanted me to never stop playing. That's what she made me promise. And I'm keeping that promise, no matter what you think about it. My mother's eyes were cold. You've become very selfish, Catherine. No, I said. I've become very clear about what matters. There's a difference. I got my coat and left. Elena found me in the parking lot as I was getting into my car. Thank you, she said breathlessly. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Everyone's talking about it. You made tonight even more special. I'm glad. I mean it. Thank you. And I'm sorry. About everything. You were right about the piano. It was wrong to even ask. I hugged her. Congratulations on your marriage. I hope you're happy. I am. And I hope you will be too. You deserve it. She went back inside. I drove home alone, my hand still humming with the memory of the keys. The house was empty when I arrived. Everyone was still at the reception. I went straight to the living room and sat down at the piano. I played for 2 hours, alone in the dark. Every piece my grandmother had taught me. The music filled the empty house, filled all the spaces where pain had been, filled me until there was nothing left but sound and memory and peace. When I finished, I rested my hands on the keys and closed my eyes. I had won. Not through revenge or cruelty, but through simple refusal. I had refused to surrender what was mine. I had refused to disappear. I had refused to let them erase me or my grandmother's legacy. And in refusing, I had become impossible to ignore. The conservatory in New York was expecting me in 2 months. I would leave this house and build a life in music exactly as my grandmother had wanted. I would play in concert halls and teach students and honour the legacy she'd given me. Elena would have her marriage. My parents would have their pride in her. But they would also have this memory now, this evening when their other daughter stood up and showed them what they'd almost destroyed, what they'd tried to sell for wedding decorations. They would live with that knowledge for the rest of their lives. Every time they looked at the empty space in the living room after I took the piano to New York, they would remember what it sounded like when I played it. They would remember 200 people standing and applauding. They would remember that they'd almost sold it without asking. And Elena would remember too. She would tell the story at dinner parties. My sister played Claire de Lune at my wedding. It was the most beautiful moment of the whole night. She would mean it. I went upstairs to my room and lay down on my bed. The ceiling was the same as it had always been, but I was different. I had died and come back. I had seen the worst outcome and changed it. I had saved myself and my grandmother's legacy. Outside my window, the night was quiet. Somewhere across town, Elena and David were probably starting their honeymoon. Somewhere in the past, my grandmother was still teaching me to play, her arthritic hands guiding mine across the keys. And somewhere in the future that would never happen now, a different Catherine was fading into silence, losing herself piece by piece until there was nothing left. But not me. Not anymore. I closed my eyes and felt the music still humming in my fingertips, alive and permanent and mine. I had played at my sister's wedding without being asked in my previous life. But this time, I had played on my own terms. I had reclaimed my voice. I had stood in the middle of that room and reminded everyone, including myself, that I existed. And I had done it all without saying a word beyond the music. That was enough. That was everything. The piano was mine, the music was mine, the future was mine, and no one would ever take it from me again.